In this episode, let's understand how the data 65 is stored if the statement is like this. Similarly, the same data 65, how it is stored if the statement is like this. Well, in both of these cases, as you can notice, the data happens to be 65, but the difference is that in this case, 65 is stored in an integer variable, whereas in this case, 65 happens to be a string. So, how really is the integer data and the string data stored in the memory is what we have to understand. And also, what we need to understand in this episode is what are the interview questions that can be asked on this concept. So, let's start. Even before I proceed and tell you the manner in which the integer data and the string data is stored in the memory unit, let me consider back the same two statements. Also, I would like to see in the display as to how they actually look. So, I would print both of the variables x and y, and this is the complete program, and when I'll execute, this is the output. Well, as you can notice, in the output, they appear completely the same. Does it mean that the manner in which this 65 is stored in the memory is absolutely the same as the second 65? Or is there really any difference? Because at least to the naked eye, they appear the same. So, really are they stored in the same manner? Let's explore. Let me begin by considering this statement. Well, in that statement, the data 65 is stored in a integer variable x, and in Java, integer variable is allocated 4 bytes, and you know that a byte is made up of 8 bits, which means that an integer variable x has been allocated a total of 32 bits. In fact, it is these 32 bits which collectively that we refer to as x. And how is the data 65 stored in this? Well, you know that we can only store the data in the bits in the form of zeros and ones, which means that 65 has to be converted to the binary form if we have to store it in the memory unit. And how to convert it to the binary form? Like this. That 65, we have to divide it by 2, and I get the remainder as 1. Again divide by 2, remainder is 0. Divide by 2, remainder is 0. Divide by 2, remainder is 0. Again divide by 2, the remainder is 0, and again when I'll divide by 2, the remainder is 0, and finally, what I understand is that 65, which is in the decimal form, when converted to the binary form, happens to be 1000001. And this binary form is what gets stored in the variable x like this. And I'm sure you would ask, what about the remaining locations? Well, in all the remaining bits, there would be zeros. Anyway, the integer data 65 is stored in the memory unit like this. How is the string 65 stored? Let's understand. Now, let me consider my second statement. In this, the data 65 happens to be a string, and let me tell you that Java internally to store this would make use of the Unicode. Yes, Unicode could be a new term to some of my viewers, but let me tell you that Java to store this data doesn't make use of the ASCII code, rather it makes use of the Unicode. And the Unicode for 6 happens to be this, and the Unicode for 5 is this. Well, at this point in time, I'm sure you would be having some questions about what really is the ASCII code and what really is the Unicode and how they are different, how they are similar, and so many questions. But let me tell you that moving forward in some other episode, I would explain everything about the ASCII code and the Unicode. But as of now, what I can say to you is that 65 is stored like this. And you know very well that Java treats strings as an object, and an object cannot just contain data, it would also contain methods. In fact, all of this together is what we call as an object, and y happens to be a reference to this object. So, what it all means is that that statement is going to store the data 65 like this in the memory unit. Now, let me get my program back. You know that that statement internally stores the data like this. and the second one internally stores the data like this. So certainly the data is stored in a different way altogether, but the next two statements, when I'll execute, what they print to me is this. Well, by looking at the output, an unseasoned programmer might assume that internally the first 65 and the second 65 are the same, but you certainly have understood that the first 65 is integer 65, which is internally stored like this, whereas the second 65, though it appears the same, happens to be a string 65, and internally this is the way it is stored. Anyway, why am I explaining this in so much of a detail to you? That's because there will be programming interview question asked on this. In fact, not one, there will be two programming questions on this. What really are those programming interview questions? Well, if you want to know, watch my next episode.